we're gonna walk through probably my favorite side dish and one that is a hit every time I make it, this smoked mac and cheese. So we're gonna make everything from scratch, make a little roux with our cheese sauce, put it all together, bake it off at 225, and it turns out fantastic every single time. So come on, let's check this one out. To get started, I filled up a medium pan with water before adding a couple tablespoons of salt to then bring it to a full boil. Once it's boiling, I pour in a total of 1 pound of macaroni. Shown here is some gluten-free chickpea pasta, but grab your favorite noodle. Lastly, I give it a quick stir to incorporate, then allow it to boil to an al dente finish, which means soften but still a little bit on the crunchy side, as this macaroni will finish cooking later when I place it in the smoker. Now that my macaroni is boiled and cooled, I get started by creating a roux that will become the base of my cheese sauce. This starts with a half a stick of butter placed in a medium saucepan on medium-high heat on my Traeger Timberline induction top. I allow the butter to fully melt, and when it does, I give it one final whisk to get that last little bit melted. Next, I pour in half a cup of flour. In this recipe, I use gluten-free flour, but any all-purpose flour will work great in creating a roux. Next, I use my whisk to incorporate the flour and butter together until it forms a paste. A roux is really important as it is what will make our cheese sauce thicken and also add some delicious fats and flavors from the butter. But the main benefit of a roux is to keep the flour from clumping all together. With my roux created, next I pour in 1.5 cups of my total of 2 cups of half and half milk. But feel free to substitute whole milk, almond milk, any of those types of liquids. As I turn up the heat and bring the mixture to a low boil, I added some seasoning. Here it's my Big Easy, which is a Cajun blackening seasoning to give it just a little bit of extra spice. If you're looking for something different, a similar substitute is Killer Hog's King Crawl seasoning. Now as the cream mixture begins to heat up, I whisk it continuously until it starts to thicken. I'm looking for a texture that is not really very runny, but is also kind of the consistency similar to like a gravy. As I get to the consistency that I'm looking for, I'm ready to now start incorporating my cheeses. In this recipe, I'm going to be using 3 equal parts, first of Colby Jack cheese, sharp cheddar cheese to bring in some tanginess, and lastly some mozzarella cheese that's really going to melt and kind of bring everything together. Now this is a great opportunity with this recipe to get really creative and use any ratio of cheeses that you like, totaling roughly 3 cups. As I let these cheeses melt together while stirring, you can see the heat was a little bit higher than what I should have had it at, and it kind of made these cheeses clump up slightly instead of melting together like they should. This is really why I always like to save off about a half a cup of my half and half just in case I make this mistake. And since I did that, I went ahead and incorporated the remaining half cup and then whisked it over medium heat to melt and incorporate my cheese mixture into a nice creamy consistency without any lumps. And now with all the cheese sauce melted together, that's it. This cheese sauce is totally ready. And next, I'm gonna get started building out this mac and cheese. First, I add roughly half of my boiled and cooled noodles to an 8x13 disposable pan. Then I grab my cheese sauce off the induction burner and pour in about half before setting the rest aside. Now since these pasta noodles are gluten-free, they can become somewhat brittle. That's why I'm really careful not to stir, but rather kind of fold over the cheese sauce and the noodles to really incorporate it as best that I can. Now that I've got that first layer incorporated fairly well, I dump the remaining noodles before pouring in the rest of the cheese sauce to finally fully incorporate everything together in this pan. But before I'm ready to stir everything together, I want to apply a liberal amount of my Big Easy blackening seasoning. Again, feel free to substitute your favorite seasoning for whatever flavor profile that you're going for. Finally, to finish it all off, I come over the top with my bourbon brisket rub, which is a heavy salt, pepper, garlic. A great substitute for this rub, another one from Killer Hogs, is the TX rub. This will get you to a very similar flavor profile. With all my ingredients added, I carefully fold my cheese mixture into all the noodles to incorporate it all as the best that I can. Working really to get this cheese noodle ratio throughout the entire dish very consistent. For the last portion of this recipe, this is something that is certainly optional. I measure out a half a cup of Parmesan cheese and 1 cup of crackers. Here I'm using some gluten-free crackers, but feel free to substitute your favorite crackers like Ritz or something similar. With the crackers measured out, I then crush them up into a pretty fine crumble so that I can put them in a skillet, but first I need to melt that remaining half stick of butter from earlier in this recipe into a small to medium-sized saucepan, again using my Traeger induction top. With all the butter melted, I start by dumping my cracker crumbles in, incorporating those into the butter to toast them up a little bit, while still on that medium heat. Then after they've soaked up some of that butter, I drop in the Parmesan cheese before giving everything a good stir. I really try not to let this go too long, as it'll tend to kind of clump up. I just want to get everything incorporated and heated up slightly. With my cracker crumble ready, and my daughter asking me if she can make a cake, I sprinkle the crumble on top of the mac and cheese before hitting it with some final seasoning in my bourbon brisket rub and also my Big Easy. And that's it. We've got everything we need to put this thing on the smoker. It is worth noting that sometimes I like to prep this side dish for an event the next day and place it in the fridge overnight. But if I'm going to do that, I'll probably wait to make a cracker crumble until that day. But here I'm ready to put it in the smoker, and I'm going to run it at 225 for about 45 minutes. You can certainly do it a little bit hotter to get it done a little bit quicker, depending on what protein you've got on and you're cooking. But that's it. This is a super simple smoker version of a classic, some scratch-made mac and cheese. I'd love to hear your comments about how you would take this to the next level, maybe even with some different techniques or different ingredients or different ideas. Look, if you've made it this far, I can't thank you enough. But if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and watch some of the other great videos I've created on my backyard pitmaster journey.